The side-scrolling beat-em-up. There was a time when its brand of multiplayer fun ruled the arcade and console landscapes. Games like Double Dragon, Final Fight, and Streets of Rage were on nearly everyone's must-play list, and they were often used to discuss what hardware was worth buying due to their graphics and sound presentations. IPs from other forms of media would often find themselves represented by the genre, and would go on to become some of the most beloved games of their time. But with the full-scale arrival of polygon games in the 32-bit era, the beat-em-up genre would slow to a crawl and virtually disappear. In this episode, we are going to take a look at the games on the Sega Saturn that would represent the genre. There wasn't a ton of them, but what did show up represented the genre well. I hope you guys enjoy beat-em-ups on the Sega Saturn. PuLiRuLa was released on the Saturn in late 1997 under the Arcade Gears label, with the duties being handled by Xing. This was a port of the 1991 Taito arcade game of the same name, and is one hell of a weird experience. The flow of time has been hijacked by an evil dude trying to destroy the land. With your trusty magic stick, you must do battle to restore things back to normal. It follows the classic mold of the genre, side-scrolling stages giving way to boss battles that end the area of play. Gameplay is basically the hack-and-slash style of beat-em-up, where you use your magic stick to turn enemies into various animals who then run away and can be collected for score. The graphics here are represented by ultra-colorful characters and backdrops. Sprites are large and well animated, and there is no slowdown to speak of, even in the game's multiplayer co-op. The soundtrack is at times excellent, though it does border on being overly whimsical at times. The biggest problem with this one is the gameplay never really gets past your basic attacks and magic. This weakness is amplified by the poor hit detection of the enemies and bosses. Sometimes you're standing right beside, or on top of an enemy or boss, and you hit absolutely nothing. Some of the harder bosses can wreck you in seconds until you have a better feel for where and when you can actually score a hit. Overall, there is a draw to the weirdness of this one though. The colorful and well-animated graphics definitely appeal, and the randomness of the characters and environments are definitely different. Check it out for those reasons, and if you want to add a legitimate copy to your collection, complete copies tend to go around $100 or so in good shape. Late 1996 would see Capcom's, and I'm sure I'm about to butcher this, Cheero Kaoru Sekiheki no Tatakai, or Warriors of Fate to us Westerners. Based on the arcade game of the same name, this is another hack-and-slash beat-em-up with two-player co-op. It's based on the Japanese comic series that ran in the early 1980s, and has 5 different characters you can choose from at the start of the game. Gameplay is spread across weapon and melee style attacks, and is your typical left to right scrolling stages with boss battles at the end of the scene. Lots of different combo attacks, special items, and nuke attacks are spread across the various characters you can play as, and the screen is always absolutely loaded with enemies to keep you busy. Graphics are very well done here, with the animation and detail you come to expect from Capcom's Saturn efforts in full force. The soundtrack is impressive as well, feeling a little Conan the Barbarian at times, and never failing to keep the pace and atmosphere feeling epic. If you've ever played some of Capcom's other efforts, such as King of the Dragons or Knights of the Round, you know exactly what to expect here. This is an excellent port of an arcade original, especially when considering it doesn't require a RAM expansion cart to play. I highly recommend it if you like the genre at all, and I'd say it's even a must-own for the system. A patient collector can get this one for under $100 complete easily, and those of you willing to bid the auction sites with restraint can get it for as little as $50 from time to time. Die Hard Arcade, also known as Dynamite Deka in Japan, was released in early 1997 by Sega themselves. This would mark one of the few beat-em-ups for the Saturn using a fully polygonal engine. Based on the Bruce Willis hit movie from the 1980s, this one has two-player co-op and a slew of weapons and moves for you to do battle with. The story and characters have been changed around a bit from the movie, with saving the president's daughter your primary mission now. Although the environments have made of polygons, gameplay occurs strictly on a 2D plane, with you able to move around the allotted area up, down, left, and right. This gameplay relies heavily on both melee and weapon attacks, with even set pieces being up for grabs at times. The polygon graphics were never what I'd call great, and the small areas you do battle in lack scope in any kind of real scale. That said, it runs really good, and nothing here looks bad or broken. If anything, it showed Sega was easily capable of doing a Golden Axe or Streets of Rage game in 3D. Why they went the route of this one, instead of a trusted IP that had helped sell millions of 16-bit hardware, is beyond me. That's not a knock on Die Hard Arcade here though. This one is a solid beat-em-up and does a good job of representing what could have been if Sega had its priorities straight. If you're looking for a copy to own for yourself, the Japanese version is much more inexpensive to come by, often going for $20 or so. Segasoft and Appaloosa Interactive would co-developed mid-1996 strangely named Three Dirty Dwarves. Sort of a cross between a beat-em-up and the Lost Vikings, this one is a game I actually despised back at its initial release. I wanted Sega to make Streets of Rage 4 and Golden Axe Revenge of Death Adder, and this garbage just didn't cut it. Some years later I actually sat down with it again and gave it a try, and came away from it with a very different view. The story is really out there, centering on 4 kids playing a game that somehow allows the fictitious characters into their world to help them escape the clutches of an evil general. The gameplay features 3 dwarves who have both melee and long distance attacks, using different weaponry, as well as combined special attacks that deal more damage. It is actually 3-player co-op with a Saturn 6-player adapter, but if you are playing alone, you have the ability to switch to any dwarf at any time during gameplay. The secret to success here is to make sure you keep all 3 dwarves active after taking a hit, and using melee attacks on anything close, and distance attacks only when called for. Boss battles are fun and often unique, and the challenge is solid as well. The hand-drawn comic book style art design has its appeal, and I never experienced any kind of frame rate problems. Unfortunately for collectors, this one has gotten up there in price in the last few years, with even disc-only copies being close to $50 regularly. You guys know the early 1996 treasure classic Guardian Heroes very well. RPG elements, branching story choices, multiple endings, co-op and competitive multiplayer, and unlockable characters all define this fantastic experience. The gameplay takes place on 3 planes that can be switched on the fly, either to attack enemies there or to avoid attacks altogether. I am a really big fan of the pixel style art employed here, even when it scales in close up. It truly shows off what the Saturn was capable of when manipulating 2D sprites and backgrounds, loading the screen with tons of enemies and effects, all while scaling everything effortlessly. It also had a great soundtrack, often switching between genres of music, and it all seemed to fit whatever was going on screen. This is an absolute must-own for fans of the genre, and one of the high points of Saturn exclusives at the time. An English version isn't cheap though, so if you just want to have the experience, it's also on Xbox Live, via the Xbox 360 and Xbox One. Athena would do the honors for Crow's The Battle Action for the Sega Saturn, and release it in late 1997. This super deformed beat-em-up is based on the Japanese comic series about high school gangs vying for power and territory. I actually like Crow's The Battle Action a bit, despite the stiff gameplay and cheap boss battles. There's also a mechanic in being knocked down when your life is low, and having to button mash yourself to get up. This is infuriating during a tough battle, and lends a fatigue to a game that already pushes your limits with repetition. Crow's The Battle Action is a decent looking game though, and as long as you aren't turned off by super deformed art, the colorful graphics and decent sized sprites should be appreciated. The soundtrack at times channels Capcom's greats like Final Fight, and is overall an excellent addition to the game. Standing on its own merits, and with all its gameplay irritations considered, Crow's The Battle Action isn't the best, or the worst, Saturn beat-em-up. It falls into the territory of being a curiosity, or something to mess around with for an afternoon. Shockingly, collectors have gone batshit crazy over this, pushing its price often past $100 for a complete version in good condition. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you think it's worth that, but I do recommend that you at least give the game a try. It isn't going to challenge Streets of Rage or Guardian Heroes, but you might find something here worth playing. Coming out late in the Saturn's life, the Japanese exclusive Dungeons & Dragons collection from Capcom saw the light of day in early 1999. Containing both Capcom Dungeons & Dragons beat-em-up games from the arcade, this package requires the Saturn's 4MB RAM expansion cart to operate, and seconds into the game you can see why. Large, colorful sprites litter the screen with beautiful animation. The two-player co-op is a downgrade from the arcade's 4, but it's still ultra fun with a friend. The gameplay is varied and loaded with choices thanks to the multiple character types you can choose from. Magic attacks, melee attacks, items, combos, specials. There's a ton to learn here to master the game. The film quality soundtrack is epic, and lends an atmosphere that captures the spirit of the world faithfully. If I had to level criticism at anything, it'd be the long load times that crop up between some of the areas and when you switch your characters at a continue. You spend quite a bit of time staring at now loading screens, though it's more a nitpick than a full-on complaint. Outside of that, you get two very good beat-em-ups here that can be enjoyed with a friend, and since this was exclusive to the console during the era, no equivalent system has anything like it. It was part of the Saturn's final hurrah in Japan, once again showing the Japanese Saturn was simply a must-own in comparison to its Western incarnations. If you'd like to own one for yourself, expect to pay around $100 for a complete in-box set of discs. But if you just want to play it, it's available on just about everything under the Dungeons & Dragons Chronicles of Mystaria branding for much less. Technosoft's mid-1995 beat-em-up release, Nekketsu Oyako, commonly referred to as Hot-Blooded Family in the West, is a Streets of Rage and Final Fight style endeavor with 3 playable characters and co-op multiplayer. While not up to the quality of the games that inspired it, this one is still pretty damn solid. While the graphics aren't anything that couldn't have been done in the 16-bit era, sprites are still large and well animated, and each stage is super colorful and loaded with detail. Locations range from real-world neon-lit streets to the ultra-silly, such as inside a living whale. Enemies are much the same, with street punks being familiar fodder, and even squid and water people needing an ass-kicking. Gameplay flows as one would expect. Basic combos come from simple button mashing, with more attacks available from dashes, special attacks, and special moves. Little touches like 2 younger characters unable to use alcohol to restore life are nice touches as well. I would be remiss if I didn't mention just how awesome the soundtrack is to this game. Technosoft is known for some kick-ass music, and they delivered here in spades. It's the kind of goodness that needs to be ripped and listened to on the way to work. Streets of Rage would never grace the Saturn, unfortunately, so this one is about as close as we have to the real thing. It's a fun and often funny beat-em-up that has enough going for it to scratch the itch of reliving the great beat-em-up years of the 8 and 16-bit eras. Be patient on this one and steer clear of the ludicrous buy it nows on eBay. Auctions tend to go for far less, so be patient and buy smart. Coming in late 1996 was Acclaim's Batman Forever, the arcade game. Based on the movie starring Val Kilmer, I knew I'd need to cover this one again eventually. This gem was the subject of one of my most unpopular videos during my first run, with me harpooning it as one of the worst games on the system. And you know what? I feel the exact same now. This game is awful. From the overly dark digitized graphics that live in pixelated hell, to the uselessly flashy power-ups that stop the action in its tracks, right down to the completely uneven difficulty that can see a life bar chewed up in seconds by cheap hits and overpowered bosses. It's a dog-ugly, shit-playing experience that has little redeemable to speak of. But you know what? Some people absolutely love it. They dig the super fast combo-based gameplay, the arcade level of challenge, the 2-player co-op, and even the over-top power moves. Whichever side of the fence you fall on, I can say at the very least there's nothing else like Batman Forever, the arcade game on the Sega Saturn. That alone warrants a recommendation from me that you at least give this one a try. Retail copies tend to be expensive no matter the region you're in, so if you want to go legit, watch the auctions, and again, stay away from those damn buy it now prices. Thanks for watching my episode on beat-em-ups for the Sega Saturn. If you like the channel and content, please consider supporting it so I can keep the Sega love coming. If you are on Facebook, head over there to hear about giveaways and other channel information. I also have a new merchandise store up if you like the Sega Lord X logo. I am Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching. I will catch you next time.